Okay, welcome back class. It's so great to see you again. And today we're going to learn about weathering, erosion, and deposition. Of course, today's topic is about science. Okay, so what do you see here? Who wants to guess? Yes, James? Yep, he's correct. He said this is the Earth. Ooh, so how is the topic today related to the Earth? Well, you will figure it out. Did you know that the Earth is more than 46 billion years old? This is very old, right? How old are you guys? In today's lesson, we will learn the three key terms, which are weathering, erosion, and deposition. Please listen carefully throughout the lesson. Let's watch the video first.
Weathering, erosion, and deposition are three important vocabulary words. So it's important that you understand the definition of each of these key terms. Weathering is the breaking down of rocks and minerals into smaller pieces. And you can see that this layer of rock has been broken down into lots of different pieces, and some of those pieces are very small. But anytime we break down a rock into smaller pieces, we call it weathering. Wind and flowing water can cause rocks to be weathered. On the left, you see how all those rocks are smooth. That's because water has weathered those rocks. It has broken off all the little bits around them until eventually the water has made them smooth. And on the right, you can see how those rocks are broken and cracked. That's been caused by the weathering of the rocks from wind and water. Glaciers are huge masses of ice that can break apart and grind down rocks as they move across a landscape. So just for scale, there's some people right there in the picture, and you can see how big that glacier is. And glaciers move across land, and when something that big moves across the land, it's going to break down and weather the rocks in its path. Ice can also break apart rocks as it freezes and expands inside cracks. So if it rains, water can fill in the cracks in a rock. And then maybe at night it gets cold enough for that water to freeze. When water freezes, it expands. And so it can push on the sides of the rock and actually make those cracks a little bit bigger. And then maybe in the daytime, it gets warm enough for that ice to melt and thaw, and that water can go down into the cracks, and at night when it freezes again, it can expand a little more. And eventually, that ice can break the rock apart and weather the rock, causing it to break apart into smaller pieces. Now, this doesn't happen in just a couple days. It can take a long, long time for ice to do this to a rock, but it can happen. And here are some examples of rocks that have been broken apart by ice. Now, remember, anytime rocks are broken apart into smaller pieces, we call it weathering. So this is how ice can weather a rock. So our next term is erosion, and erosion occurs when pieces of rock and soil called sediments are carried from one place to another. And you can see that happening here in this river. It is brown because it is so full of sediments, and it's carrying them from upstream down the river from one place to another. So this is a great example of erosion. Wind can easily blow sediments across a landscape, and that's very common in the desert. Strong winds are very easily able to carry those grains of sand from one place to another in a desert. So as we saw earlier with our rivers, sediments can also be carried to new locations by the water from rivers, streams, and floods. And you can see that water is causing the erosion of this soil. It is carrying the soil away from here to another place. The water is eroding the soil. And our final term is deposition. And deposition is the process of sediments, soils, and minerals being dropped or deposited in a new place.
Alright, I hope that video was helpful. And now we'll move on. And you guys can now virtually see and actively see these three terms. So let's move on. Okay, welcome to our science experiment. So here we've got sand and we've got water. And finally we've got a tray. So what are we going to do first is pour out the sand, okay? And then after that, we're going to create like a little river bank, okay? So I'm going to use my finger. Okay, so we'll begin with weathering. So I'll take the glass of water and I'm gonna pour it to our river bank. Okay, so do you see how the water is breaking sand and the riverbank? This process is called weathering. Remember that weathering is a process of breaking down rocks or sand. The second one is called erosion. As the water runs down to the bottom of the pan, it carries the sand, right? Erosion carries broken rocks and sand away. And then water or wind can cause erosion. Finally, deposition. All sand was carried down and was deposited to the bottom of the pan. Deposition drops sediment such as sand into the new place. I hope this was helpful. Okay, so that was a fun activity, right? Our next one is class activity time. So here are some rules. Rule number 1. Based on your card that was given in the beginning of the class, make the group. For example, if you have the card with number 1, find other students who also has the same numbers, and then you guys will be in the same group. Rule number 2. After finding correct group, the teacher will give you topic from weathering, erosion, and deposition. Rule number 3, you have 15 minutes to organize, research, and plan to debate with other group. Remember to define and give evidence or reasons of why your chosen topic is the main reason that Earth is changing. And finally, as you debate, the teacher will give feedback based on your knowledge, teamwork, communication skills, and appropriate language. Also, be respectful while others are speaking. Alright, so I hope you're all ready, and well, you guys did very great job, and I'm very proud of you. And finally, it's the time for short quiz. Okay, so here is the link for the quiz, and you all have 10 minutes to complete this short quiz, okay? And then work individually. This means no talking. And then when you're finished, just click the submit button and then I can say it. Alright, the time has ended and now it's the reflection time. So what was the most challenging part of the lesson? Clara? Yeah? Okay, so Clara says she had a hard time understanding what erosion meant. That's okay, yeah? Okay, and now, finally, we live in an earth that God created. It is very important to learn about this topic so that we are aware of what causes Earth to change. We should appreciate and respect God's work and God's creation and always be grateful for His work. Thank you so much for listening and see you next time.